My neighbor's kid kept kicking his soccer ball into my window. I asked him to play somewhere else. He said, "It's just a ball." The next time it happened, I kept the ball. When they asked for it back, I said, "It's just a ball." He stopped playing near my house after that. I've lived here for over a decade, enjoying the peace and the occasional friendly wave from neighbors. That was until the new family moved in next door. They seemed nice enough at first, a couple in their late 30s with a young son, probably around 10 years old. The boy, whom I'll refer to as Timmy, was energetic and always seen with a soccer ball. I didn't mind. Kids need to play. However, it wasn't long before his soccer ball became a recurring guest in my yard. Initially, I would toss the ball back over the fence without much thought. But as days turned into weeks, the frequency increased. Sometimes, the ball would hit my windows or land in my flower beds, damaging the plants I'd carefully nurtured. I decided it was time to address the issue. One afternoon, I caught Timmy retrieving his ball from my yard. I approached him calmly and said, "Hey there, could you try to keep the ball in your yard? It's been coming over quite a bit." He looked at me and shrugged. "It's just a ball." I was taken aback by his dismissive attitude, but chose not to escalate the situation. I hoped that bringing it to his attention would suffice. Unfortunately, the problem persisted. A few days later, while I was working in my home office, I heard a loud thud. I looked up to see the soccer ball bouncing off my window. Frustrated, I went outside, picked up the ball, and decided to keep it. I placed it in my garage and went back to work. Later that evening, there was a knock on my door. Timmy's father stood there, looking somewhat annoyed. "My son says his ball ended up in your yard. Can we have it back?" I looked at him and replied, "It's just a ball." He stared at me, seemingly processing my words, then turned and walked away without another word. Since that day, the soccer ball has not made another appearance in my yard. Timmy now plays further away from our shared fence, and the peace I once enjoyed has returned. Sometimes, setting boundaries is necessary, even if it means being a bit petty. A week passed. Quiet. Calm. Almost too calm. Then came the morning when I stepped out to get the newspaper, and something sharp crunched under my foot. I looked down. My front lawn was scattered with jagged bits of broken glass, bottle shards, glinting in the early sun. Whoever did it had been sneaky, maybe even careful. It wasn't just dumped. It was spread around, thinly, like they didn't want it to be obvious right away. But it was there, waiting for someone to walk barefoot or for my mower to catch a piece and send it flying. I knew it had to be them. I didn't have enemies. I kept to myself. Never caused problems. Timmy and his parents were the only new variable in the equation of my life. But I had no proof. And people like them? The types who smile fake and say, "Oh, kids will be kids," while letting their own run wild? They deny it all day. Still, I cleaned up the glass. Quietly. Didn't say a word. 2 days later, the fence between our yards, the one I'd put up myself after saving for months, had graffiti on it. Big letters in spray paint, balloon face. What that meant, I had no clue. But it didn't feel random. It felt like a message. Like something Timmy had overheard from his parents and decided to weaponize. I called the police. They came out, took photos, nodded politely, and told me unless I had cameras or saw who did it, there wasn't much they could do. They handed me a little pamphlet about neighborhood mediation and left. That was it. So I bought a camera. Not one of those cheap doorbell things. A real camera. Motion sensors. Night vision. I mounted it above my porch, another in the backyard, pointing toward the fence. I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. That's when I saw what they were really like. Timmy, late at night, sneaking over with a flashlight and a Sharpie, writing things on my fence, scratching into my car with rocks, even once trying to pry open the side gate with a crowbar. And his dad? Standing watch. Laughing. I sent the footage to the police. This time, they came back with more interest. They spoke to the neighbors. One older lady from across the street said she'd seen Timmy's dad hanging around my driveway late at night. Another neighbor, a younger guy with 2 kids of his own, admitted he'd seen Timmy throwing things at my windows a few weeks back but didn't want to get involved. When the cops questioned them, the family denied everything. They claimed I'd edited the footage, said I had a personal vendetta against their kid, that I was a bitter old man with no life. The police didn't charge them, but they warned them. Officially, that seemed to piss them off more than anything else. The next day, my power went out. Not the whole block, just mine. I checked the breaker. Nothing seemed off. I called the power company. They said someone had tampered with the outdoor meter, pulled wires loose. That was war. I didn't retaliate. Not in the way they expected. I went deeper. Looked into public records. Found out the house they were living in wasn't theirs. It belonged to the wife's mother. And she wasn't on good terms with them. I hired someone to dig into her contact info. Sent her a letter. Polite. Firm. With photos of the vandalism. The footage. Copies of the police report. 2 weeks later, a for sale sign showed up in their yard. But it didn't end there. One night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to a sound. Something banging. Repetitive. I looked out the window. There was smoke. Fire. Someone had set my garbage bin ablaze and pushed it against the side of my house. The flames were licking the siding. My heart stopped. I called 911, grabbed the garden hose, sprayed like hell until the fire department showed up. They said if I'd slept 10 more minutes, my whole house could have gone up. The siding was scorched. Windows cracked from the heat. And I knew. I just knew. This was them. One last move before they left. I handed over every bit of footage I had. Fire marshal launched an investigation. Cops got involved again. Arson. This time, serious charges were possible. Then came the knock. Their lawyer. He offered a deal. If I agreed not to press charges, they'd be gone in 2 days. The house sold, paperwork done. Clean slate. I said no. This wasn't about a ball anymore. It was about respect. About safety. About not letting people get away with treating others like trash just because they thought they could. And even after they left, I kept the cameras up. Kept watching. Because when you live through something like that, you don't sleep the same way again. You don't walk barefoot on your own lawn. You don't let anything slide. Not anymore. But the story didn't end with their departure. Because once a line is crossed, once the cracks in your calm life start to show, you realize just how fragile peace really is. And how easily it can be taken away. 2 months after they moved out, the quiet started to feel normal again. I painted over the scorched siding, replaced the cracked windows, even reseeded the lawn where the fire had warped the grass. It was a slow return to something like peace. Then, in early October, I got a certified letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name and address scrawled in sharp, uneven handwriting. Inside was a single page with a photocopy of a notice, claim of adverse possession. It was filed under my address. Someone was claiming part of my backyard belonged to them. At first, I thought it was some kind of prank. But I looked up the form, and it was real. A formal claim filed at the county office. It listed a plot of land, a narrow strip along the back fence, as being in dispute. The kicker? The person making the claim had the same last name as Timmy's dad. I contacted a lawyer. We found out that technically, the strip of land in question had been marked incorrectly on an old survey map from the 70s. Their lawyer was trying to use that to argue that because they had been using it openly and continuously before selling the house, it legally belonged to them. It was a long shot. A dirty legal trick. But not impossible to win if it went unchallenged. I spent nearly $5,000 on legal fees fighting it. We got new surveys, pulled neighborhood records, even tracked down the original owner who built the fence. It took months, but eventually, a judge dismissed the claim. That should have been it. That should have been the end. Then in December, weird things started happening. Packages that I never ordered showed up at my door. Food deliveries in the middle of the night. One night, a tow truck pulled up and started hooking up my car, claiming someone reported it as abandoned. I ran outside in a panic, waving the title and screaming until they finally backed off. I knew what it was. Harassment. A game. I changed all my passwords, canceled all unused accounts, set every social media page I had to private. I installed 2 more cameras, now pointing toward the street. One high, one low. I even bought a dashcam for my car, just in case. Then one morning in late January, I woke up and my back gate was open. Not broken, just unlatched. I never left it open. Ever. I checked the footage. At 3:27 a.m., a figure in a hoodie approached the gate and tried the latch. When it opened, they stepped in. Didn't rush. Just walked slowly, like they knew where they were. They didn't steal anything. Didn't vandalize anything. Just stood in the yard for about 2 minutes. Looking around. Then left. I showed the footage to the police. They said they'd file a report but couldn't identify the person. Too dark. No visible face. Could have been a kid, they said. Or a drunk. But I knew. It was a message. A warning. They wanted me to know they weren't done. I started sleeping with a baseball bat by the bed. Not because I was scared, though maybe I was, but because I needed to feel ready. That sense of violation, of being watched, it didn't fade. It got heavier. In February, I got a call from the HOA. Apparently, someone had filed a formal complaint about me, claiming I was spying on neighbors with surveillance equipment. That my cameras were invasive and made people uncomfortable. I was told I had 30 days to adjust the angle of my cameras or face fines. I attended the HOA meeting, brought my footage, told the whole story. A few members backed me, but others were clearly uncomfortable. One woman, a newer resident, spoke up and said she thought I was obsessive, that I made the neighborhood tense. That night, my mailbox was smashed in with a bat. I replaced it the next day. Metal this time. March brought the final twist, so far, anyway. A man showed up at my door. Mid-40s. Nervous energy. Said he was a private investigator. He asked if I knew the family that used to live next door. I told him I did. He said he was working for a client, a bank. The family had defaulted on a massive loan, using the grandmother's house as collateral without her knowledge. There was now a fraud investigation underway. The investigator believed the family was hiding assets. Maybe in a storage unit. Maybe in a property under someone else's name. He asked if I had seen them coming back to the neighborhood. I said yes. That I had footage. That I was willing to help. He left his card. And suddenly, the situation turned from personal to criminal. Bigger than just me. Bigger than a soccer ball. These people weren't just vengeful neighbors, they were con artists. Possibly involved in financial crimes, and they targeted me because I'd embarrassed them. Cost them their home. Got in the way. And still, I look over my shoulder. Still check my cameras every night before bed. Because the scariest thing about all this? They haven't been arrested yet. And I know they're not done. By April, I'd stopped pretending this would go away. I wasn't sleeping well. I'd lost weight. Even when I walked to the mailbox, I scanned the street like I was on patrol. My home, once the only place I felt calm, now felt like a trap I was stuck inside. My hands would shake when I checked the cameras. I hated it. Hated what this war had turned me into. Then one day, my lawyer called. Said there'd been a development in the fraud investigation. The former neighbors had been caught, sort of. Timmy's dad had been arrested in a different state under a fake name, trying to rent a car with stolen documents. His wife and the kid? Still missing. The arrest didn't bring closure. If anything, it made me more paranoid. I knew how these people operated: sneaky, petty, cruel in ways you didn't expect. I didn't believe for a second that the wife had just vanished. She was out there, probably planning the next move, maybe even watching me still. I kept my head down. Months passed. The neighborhood eventually quieted again. I planted new flowers, fixed the gate latch. I didn't forget, but I tried to rebuild something of a routine. Then came the letter. No stamp. Hand-delivered, slid under my door while I slept. The handwriting was small and angry. I hope it was worth it. That was all it said. My breath caught in my throat. My hands trembled as I folded the paper, heart racing like I was back at the moment I saw that first broken window. I called the detective. He said they hadn't located the wife or the kid. The case had gone cold. But he advised me to stay vigilant. As if I ever stopped. That's when I decided I couldn't keep living like this. So I made a plan. I spent 2 weeks gathering everything I had, every photo, video, letter, every call log. I made copies. I labeled everything. I put it all on a drive and mailed it to the detective, to my lawyer, to the private investigator. Then I made one more copy and hand-delivered it to the grandmother's care home. She opened the envelope slowly. Her hands were thin, her eyes sharp despite her age. I knew they were trouble, she whispered. I just didn't know how much. We talked for an hour. I told her everything. She cried. Said she'd press charges if she had to. Said she'd make sure the house sale was reversed. She had the money, and now the will to fight back. She wasn't the only one I visited. I tracked down every neighbor who had turned a blind eye. I showed them the footage. Made them watch the fire, the scratches on my car, the moment the kid tried to break in with a crowbar. Some cried. Some looked ashamed. One man, a guy who'd once told me to lighten up, looked me dead in the eye and said, I was wrong. You were right. It didn't bring peace, but it brought power. Power I hadn't felt in a long time. Then, finally, the real ending came. It was summer. Hot. Dry. I was sitting on the porch, drinking iced tea, trying to pretend like I was just a normal guy in a normal life. That's when a black SUV rolled up. Tinted windows. Out stepped the wife. She looked thinner. Pale. Hair pulled back into a tight knot. No kid in sight. She didn't say anything. Just stood there, arms crossed. I stood too. What do you want? I asked. You ruined our lives, she said. I laughed, loud, bitter. You did that yourself. She stepped closer. It was just a ball. And there it was. The full circle. The phrase that started it all. I didn't speak. Just stared. She waited. Maybe she wanted me to scream. Maybe she thought I'd beg. I didn't. After a long silence, she turned to leave. You come near me again, I said, and I swear I'll make sure you lose more than a house. She stopped but didn't look back. Then she got in the SUV and drove away. A week later, the detective called. Said she'd been caught in another state, caught using a fake ID at a bank. The kid had been with her. Both were taken into custody. CPS got involved. The grandmother stepped in. That was the end. I kept the cameras up. But now, they're just background noise. I sleep through the night. The flowers are blooming. My mailbox stands tall, unbroken. And every once in a while, I find a stray ball in my yard, another kid, just playing. I toss it back. But never forget,